Commander Vexith's crystalline body caught the soft glow of the monitoring screens as he reviewed the daily shipping reports. The Galactic Transit Authority Station Kepler-7 floated in the quiet darkness of the outer territories, far from the bustling trade routes of the inner systems. Most days here were peaceful and predictable. Cargo vessels passed through their sector, checked in with the station and continued on their way. Vexith had commanded this station for 7 cycles now, and he had grown comfortable with the routine. His crew was small but efficient. Junior observer Quillnex, whose species had evolved on a moon with low gravity, handled the sensor arrays with delicate precision. Medical officer Zal, an insectoid being with compound eyes that could see in spectrums Vexith couldn't imagine, managed the station's health protocols. There were 3 others on duty, each representing different species from across the galactic community. They worked well together despite their differences. The morning shift had just begun when Quillnex's antennae suddenly shot straight up, a sign of alarm in his species. "Commander," Quillnex said, his voice tight with concern, "we have an emergency beacon. It's a human vessel." Vexith moved across the command center, his joints clicking softly as he walked. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having joined only a few decades ago. They were considered friendly but somewhat backwards in their technology. Most species viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and gentle amusement. "What's their situation?" Vexith asked. "The ship is called Perseverance. It's a cargo hauler mid-sized. They're reporting catastrophic drive failure. The core is completely offline." Quillnex's fingers danced across his console. "They're tumbling. No power to main systems." "Activate rescue protocols immediately," Vexith ordered. "Contact the nearest emergency response teams." Zal was already working at her station, her mandibles clicking as she processed information. "Commander, we have a significant problem. There's a major solar storm moving through the relay network. It's disrupting long-range communications. I'm trying to reach rescue vessels now, but the interference is severe." Vexith felt a cold sensation in his core. Solar storms were unpredictable and could last for days. How long until a rescue team can reach them? "I'm calculating now," Zal said. She worked in silence for a moment, then looked up. "The nearest rescue vessel is currently responding to another emergency. The second nearest is undergoing maintenance. The third option is 22 cycles away, possibly longer if the storm worsens." 22 cycles. Vexith had been in space long enough to know what that meant for a disabled vessel. He pulled up the Perseverance on the main display. The ship was spinning slowly, clearly powerless. 6 life signs registered on the scan. 6 humans, stranded and helpless. "Pull up their emergency system status," Vexith commanded. Quillnex worked quickly, and within moments, data began flooding the screens. What Vexith saw made him question whether there had been some kind of error in the readings. "This cannot be correct," he said slowly. "Quillnex, verify these specifications." The young observer rechecked everything carefully. His antennae drooped. "It's verified, Commander. Their backup life support systems are entirely mechanical. Chemical oxygen generation. Manual power distribution. No automated systems at all." "Show me their emergency equipment inventory," Zal demanded. The list appeared on the central display, and the entire command crew gathered around to look. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The manifest was shockingly simple. Dehydrated food packets rated for long-term storage. Basic water purification tablets. A hand-crank generator for emergency power. Simple medical supplies including bandages, antiseptic solutions, and manual suturing kits. Paper manuals explaining repair procedures. Basic hand tools. Emergency blankets. Chemical light sticks. A first aid guide printed on waterproof paper. "This is equipment from the pre-space age," Zal whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "By our standards, this technology is hundreds of years outdated. Some of this wouldn't even qualify as emergency gear for a short-range shuttle, let alone a deep space cargo vessel." Quillnex was frantically searching through the galactic database. "I'm checking human regulations now. Commander, this isn't a mistake. This is standard. Every human vessel carries equipment like this. They call it a basic emergency kit." "Basic?" Zal's compound eyes widened. "There's nothing here that requires power. Nothing automated. Nothing that could sustain life for more than a few cycles at best." Vexith ran the calculations in his mind. 6 humans. Limited supplies. No advanced medical equipment. No AI assistance. No automated environmental controls. 22 cycles until rescue minimum. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. "We need to attempt to rescue ourselves," Vexith said, his voice firm despite the concern he felt. "Prepare the station's auxiliary craft. We cannot leave sentient beings to die when we're the closest help available." Quillnex looked up from his console, his expression grim. "Commander, I've already checked. Our auxiliary craft has a maximum safe operational range of 40 hours. The Perseverance is 14 hours away at emergency speed. We could reach them, but we wouldn't have enough fuel to return to the station. We'd be stranded as well, and our auxiliary craft doesn't have supplies for 8 beings." "What about a supply drone?" another crew member suggested. "The storm would disrupt its navigation," Zal replied. "It would never reach them. Automated systems can't handle that level of interference." Vexith felt the weight of command pressing down on him. There were no good options. He looked at the spinning human ship on the display, imagining the 6 people inside, probably terrified, probably aware they were going to die slowly as their air ran out and their systems failed one by one. "We'll monitor them constantly," Vexith said finally. "Document everything. Coordinate with rescue teams and update them every hour. If the storm clears or if their situation worsens, we'll re-evaluate our options." It was the only logical choice, but it felt hollow. He was essentially agreeing to watch 6 beings die because the mathematics of space travel were unforgiving. Quillnex set up a direct monitoring feed. The command crew could now see telemetry from the Perseverance in real time. Life support was running on backup power. Oxygen levels were stable for now. Temperature was dropping slowly as the ship's heat dissipated into space. 22 cycles until rescue arrives," Vexith said quietly, staring at the data. He looked at the primitive emergency kit manifest again, at the simple tools and basic supplies. "With equipment this primitive, they'll be dead in 5. The command center fell silent. There was nothing left to say. All they could do now was watch and wait, and hope that somehow, against all logic and reason, the humans would find a way to survive. Vexith watched the display screen as Captain Sophie Grant pulled a laminated paper checklist from a storage compartment. The human woman floated in the zero gravity of her disabled ship, her short brown hair drifting around her face. She gathered her crew of 5 others in the main cargo bay and began speaking to them calmly. "She's using paper," Quillnex said, his voice filled with disbelief. "A physical paper checklist. Not a computer. Not even a digital tablet." The aliens watched as Sophie went through the list item by item, pointing to different crew members and assigning tasks. There was no panic in her voice. No fear in her eyes. She could have been organizing a routine maintenance schedule instead of coordinating survival after a catastrophic failure. "Look at their vital signs," Zal said, studying her medical readouts. "Their heart rates are elevated but stable. Stress hormones are present but not overwhelming. They should be terrified right now." One of the humans, a tall man with dark skin and graying hair at his temples, floated over to a damaged control panel. The name on his uniform read Walsh. He opened an access hatch and began examining the broken components inside. "That's their water recycling system," Quillnex noted. "It's completely destroyed. 3 critical components are fused together from an electrical surge. There's no way to repair that without replacement parts." Walsh pulled out a small paper manual from his pocket. He flipped through the pages, studying diagrams that looked hand-drawn. Then he pushed off and floated to another section of the ship. He returned minutes later carrying pieces from 2 other damaged systems. Vexith leaned closer to the screen. "What is he doing?" They watched as Walsh began taking apart the broken components. He used simple hand tools, working carefully and methodically. He took a valve from one system, a filter from another, and a pressure regulator from a third. His hands moved with confidence, connecting pieces that were never designed to work together. "This is impossible," Zal whispered. "Those components are from completely different systems. Different manufacturers. Different specifications. They shouldn't be compatible." But Walsh made them compatible. He used wire from the emergency kit to create new connections. He wrapped joints with waterproof tape. He tested each connection by hand, feeling for pressure and checking for leaks. After 2 hours of work, he activated the makeshift system. Water began flowing through the improvised recycler. "It works," Quillnex said, his antennae trembling with confusion. "It shouldn't work, but it works." Vexith pulled up Walsh's file. "He's listed as an engineer, but his training is basic by galactic standards. He has no advanced degrees. No specialized certifications. How did he know how to do that?" "The manual," Zal pointed at the screen. "He's following instructions from a paper book. But those instructions can't possibly cover every situation. He's improvising. The crew continued monitoring. On the second cycle, one of the human crew members injured herself. A woman named Laura Price had been working on a stuck hatch when it suddenly gave way, and a sharp edge cut deep into her forearm. Blood floated in small spheres around her in the zero gravity. The human grabbed the nearest cloth and pressed it against the wound. She pushed herself toward the emergency medical kit while her crewmates called out to her in concern. When she opened the kit, the aliens expected to see advanced healing technology. Instead, they saw bandages, antiseptic bottles, and a small package labeled Suture Kit. "She's going to suture herself," Zal said, leaning forward intently. "With manual stitches. I need to watch this." Laura cleaned the wound with antiseptic while another crew member held a light for her. She opened the suture package with her teeth, removed a curved needle and thread, and began stitching her own arm. Her face showed pain, but her hands remained steady. 17 stitches, Zal counted. She did 17 stitches on her own arm while floating in zero gravity. And she's talking the entire time. She's actually joking with her crew about how this will make a good story. What species jokes while performing surgery on themselves? Quilnex asked, but nobody had an answer. By Cycle 4, the entire command crew of Kepler-7 was watching the humans constantly. They had started taking bets on how long the humans would survive. Vexith had predicted 5 cycles. Zal had given them 7. Quilnex, the most optimistic, had bet on 10. By Cycle 5 they were all wrong. The humans had established a routine that seemed impossible. They took turns manually cranking the emergency generator, 30 minutes per person, rotating through the crew every 3 hours. They rationed their food carefully, measuring every portion with a small scale. They exercised in shifts, using resistance bands from the emergency kit to prevent muscle loss in zero gravity. Sophie held a crew meeting every morning. She went through their status, their supplies, their timeline. She acknowledged problems honestly but always ended with something positive. She reminded them of small victories, shared jokes, and kept morale high with nothing but words and determination. "This is extraordinary," Vexith admitted during a command staff meeting. "Their equipment is primitive, but their procedures are sophisticated. They've prepared for this scenario extensively. Look at this." Quilnex pulled up a file he had been researching. Humans evolved on a planet they call Earth. The environmental conditions there are classified as extreme by galactic standards. Rapid weather changes. Dangerous predators. Limited resources. They spent thousands of generations learning to survive with nothing but their intelligence and their tools. But they have advanced technology now, another crew member pointed out. Why do they still carry such basic equipment? Because they don't trust complex systems during emergencies, Quilnex explained. Their history is full of examples where technology failed and only basic skills saved them. They've built that philosophy into their space program. On Cycle 8, Vexith watched as Walsh completed another impossible repair. The engineer had fixed a critical oxygen sensor using parts from a broken coffee maker and some wire from the emergency kit. The man worked while humming a song, completely relaxed. "Cancel the betting pool," Vexith announced suddenly. "They're not going to die. I don't know how, but they're going to survive until rescue arrives." Zal looked at him in surprise. "Commander, they still have 14 cycles to go. Anything could happen." "Yes, but look at them," Vexith gestured at the screen. Sophie was teaching another crew member how to tie complex knots using cord from the emergency kit. Walsh was reviewing repair manuals with 2 others. Laura was doing exercises while talking about her family back on Earth. "They're not just surviving. They're thriving. We've been watching them wrong. We thought we were documenting a tragedy. Instead, we're watching humans do exactly what humans do." "What's that?" Quilnex asked. "Survive," Vexith said simply. "Against all odds, with minimal resources, they survive. And they make it look easy." The routine on the Perseverance had become almost mundane by Cycle 10. Vexith watched as crew member Nathan Cole took his turn at the hand-crank generator. The young man settled himself into position, braced his feet against the wall, and began turning the crank with steady, rhythmic motions. He had a music player running on minimal power, and he cranked in time to the beat. 30 minutes per shift, 6 crew members, rotation every 3 hours, Quilnex noted. They've maintained this schedule without fail for 10 cycles. No complaints. No arguments about whose turn it is. Another crew member, a woman named Claire Hudson, floated nearby doing exercises with resistance bands. She was counting out loud, and when Nathan's 30 minutes ended, she simply stopped her exercises, wiped the sweat from her face, and took his place at the crank without being asked. "They've made it normal," Zal observed. "Manually generating power should be exhausting work, something done only in desperate situations. But they've turned it into just another daily task." What fascinated the aliens most was happening in a corner of the cargo bay. The sixth crew member, a quiet man named Peter Brooks, had created something that shouldn't exist. Using emergency plastic sheeting, some wire, and a small amount of rationed water, he had built a tiny greenhouse. Seeds from the emergency kit were sprouting in containers made from cut-up food packages. "Those are vegetables," Quilnex said, zooming in the camera. "He's growing actual plants in a disabled spacecraft." The plants were small, just seedlings, but they were alive and growing. Peter had positioned them near a functioning light panel, using reflective material from emergency blankets to maximize the light they received. He checked them every day, adding precise drops of water from a makeshift dropper. "They won't be ready to eat for weeks," Vexith said. "They know rescue is coming in 12 more cycles. These plants serve no practical purpose." "I think they serve a psychological purpose," Zal suggested. "Growing things, creating life, gives them hope. It's forward thinking." That evening, the human crew gathered for their ration dinner. Each person had a small portion of rehydrated food and carefully measured water. They could have eaten in silence, conserving energy. Instead, Sophie started singing an old song. One by one, the others joined in. Their voices harmonized in the cold metal cargo bay of their dying ship. "They're singing," Quilnex said unnecessarily. Everyone could hear it through the audio feed. "They do this every meal now," Vexith replied. "Songs from their home world. Sometimes they tell stories instead. Last night, Walsh spent an hour describing how to catch fish in a river using only your hands. Not one of them will ever need that skill in space, but they all listen like it was vital information." "Maybe to them it is," Zal said thoughtfully. "Maybe remembering these old skills, these primitive techniques, reminds them that their species has survived worse than a broken spaceship." On Cycle 13, disaster struck. The primary oxygen scrubber failed completely. Not a partial failure that could be worked around. Not a temporary glitch. The system that removed carbon dioxide from the air stopped working entirely. Alarms blared through the Perseverance. The aliens watched as Sophie immediately silenced the alarms and gathered her crew. "We have approximately 48 hours before carbon dioxide reaches dangerous levels," she said calmly. "Walsh, what do you need?" Walsh was already pulling out manuals and making notes on paper. "I need to build a replacement scrubber from scratch. It's possible. We have the chemical compounds in the emergency kit. I need help and I need time." "You have both," Sophie said. "Everyone else, reduce physical activity to minimum. Find quiet tasks. Stay calm. Panicking uses more oxygen. Laura, monitor everyone's blood oxygen levels hourly." Walsh went to work. The aliens watched as he spread out components across the cargo bay. Chemical compounds from the emergency kit. Filters from the destroyed air system. Tubing from the water recycler. Fan motors from the ventilation system. He had dozens of pieces that needed to become one functioning machine. "This is impossible," Zal said, but her voice lacked conviction now. She had said that before and she had been wrong. Walsh worked through the first day without stopping. His crew members brought him food and water. They held pieces while he connected them. They read instructions from manuals when his eyes grew too tired. Sophie sat nearby, not helping with the technical work but talking to him constantly. She told him stories, asked him questions about his family, kept his mind engaged while his hands worked. 31 hours, Quilnex whispered. "He's been working for 31 hours straight." The human's hands were shaking now from exhaustion. His eyes were red and bloodshot. But he kept working. He mixed chemicals according to formulas from a paper manual. He tested connections. He adjusted flow rates. He built brackets to hold everything in place using metal strips and bolts. "His body should have shut down by now," Zal said, studying Walsh's vital signs. "His cortisol levels are extreme. He should be hallucinating from stress and exhaustion. But look at his hands. Still steady when it matters." At hour 32, Walsh activated his improvised oxygen scrubber. The aliens held their collective breath as the machine hummed to life. Air began flowing through the chemical bath. Sensors showed carbon dioxide levels starting to drop. "It works," Quilnex said quietly. He built a life support system from spare parts and emergency supplies in 32 hours. Walsh tested it for another hour before he finally allowed himself to sleep. When he woke 8 hours later, the first thing he did was check the scrubber. It was still running smoothly. That night, Vexith found Quillnex studying files on human history. "What are you looking for?" Vexith asked. "Understanding," Quillnex replied. "I pulled up their training records. Every human who goes into space must complete something called survival training. They're taken to remote areas of their planet with minimal equipment and taught to survive for days using only basic tools. They learn to purify water, build shelter, find food, treat injuries. This isn't specialized training for emergencies. This is standard training for everyone. They expect systems to fail," Vexith said slowly, understanding dawning. "It's more than that," Quillnex turned to face his commander. "They don't just survive disasters. They train for this as their default expectation. Every human in space has practiced living with nothing. They've practiced staying calm during crisis. They've practiced improvising solutions from limited resources. What we're watching isn't exceptional for them. This is exactly what they prepared for." So when Walsh spent 32 hours building a life support system, Vexith continued the thought, he wasn't doing something extraordinary. He was doing exactly what his training prepared him to do. "Exactly," Quillnex confirmed. "And the rest of the crew wasn't worried because they trusted his training. They've all been through the same preparation. They know what humans are capable of." Vexith looked at the screen showing the Perseverance. Peter was tending his tiny plants. Claire was taking her turn at the hand crank. Nathan was studying a repair manual. Sophie was writing in a paper journal. Laura was exercising. Walsh was checking his oxygen scrubber one more time. 9 cycles until rescue," Vexith said. "They're going to make it easily." "Yes," Quillnex agreed. "I suspect they could make it another 22 cycles if they had to." Vexith spent cycle 16 in his private quarters, reading through files he had never bothered to examine before. The complete history of humanity lay in the galactic database and he had ignored it until now. Most species' histories were briefly reviewed during first contact protocols, but humans had been deemed unremarkable. Friendly but primitive. Eager but technologically behind. Nothing that required deep study. He had been wrong. The file began 200,000 years ago, when early humans first emerged on their planet. Earth was not like the comfortable worlds where most galactic species had evolved. The climate swung wildly between extremes. Ice ages came and went, covering vast portions of the planet in frozen wasteland. Then the ice would retreat and the heat would return, turning other regions into desert. Humans survived it all. Vexith read about megafauna, massive predators that hunted early humans. Creatures with claws and teeth and strength that should have driven humanity to extinction. But humans learned to make weapons from stones and sticks. They learned to work together, to communicate, to plan. They didn't outrun the predators or overpower them. They outsmarted them. He read about plagues that killed millions. Diseases that swept through populations with horrifying efficiency. There were no advanced medicines, no automated systems to purify water or sterilize equipment. Humans survived through observation and experimentation. They learned which plants could heal. They developed hygiene practices through trial and error. They passed knowledge down through generations using nothing but stories and teaching. "Commander, you should see this." Quillnex's voice came through the communication panel. Vexith returned to the command center, where his crew had gathered around a display screen. They were watching archived footage of human training facilities. "This is from a human space agency," Quillnex explained. "Every astronaut goes through survival training before they're certified for space travel. Watch." The footage showed human trainees being taken to a frozen wilderness. They were given basic supplies and left for a week. The aliens watched as the humans built shelters from branches and snow. They started fires using friction. They melted ice for drinking water. They caught fish through holes in the frozen lakes. Another scene showed trainees in a desert environment. They constructed shade shelters using fabric and poles. They found water by following animal tracks and digging in dry riverbeds. They navigated using the position of the sun and stars. "This is primitive survival," one of the crew members said. "Why are they teaching space travelers how to live in wilderness?" "Because they want their people to understand the fundamentals," Zal said quietly. "Look at what they're learning. Fire, water, shelter, food. The absolute basics of staying alive. They're teaching them that survival doesn't depend on technology. It depends on knowledge and determination." The footage continued. Trainees practiced first aid on each other, learning to treat injuries with minimal supplies. They took apart equipment and rebuilt it using only hand tools. They solved problems with limited resources, forced to improvise solutions on the spot. "Every single one of them goes through this," Quillnex said. "Not just the specialists. Every human who goes to space must prove they can survive without technology. Vexith thought about his own species. The crystalline beings had evolved on a stable, mineral-rich world. Their development had been peaceful and steady. They had built increasingly complex technology over millennia. If that technology failed, what would they do? He honestly didn't know. Pull up the survival training requirements for other species, he ordered. Quillnex worked quickly, compiling data from across the galactic community. The results appeared on the main screen, and the command crew fell silent as they read. Most species had minimal survival training. Basic emergency procedures. How to use escape pods. How to activate automated distress beacons. How to wait for rescue in a climate-controlled emergency shelter. Everything depended on technology functioning correctly. We've forgotten, Zal said softly. Look at this data. My species, the Zethians, we require only 8 hours of emergency training before space certification. 8 hours. The humans require 6 months. 6 months of learning how to survive without any technology at all, Quillnex added. They spend more time learning primitive skills than we spend learning to operate advanced systems. Vexith pulled up the emergency equipment standards for various species. The differences were stark. Most species carried automated life support pods that could sustain inhabitants for weeks without any input. Advanced medical systems that could diagnose and treat injuries. Automated distress beacons that connected directly to rescue networks. Food synthesizers. Water recyclers that fixed themselves. Everything was designed to work without requiring knowledge or effort from the user. The human emergency kit looked pathetic by comparison. But now Vexith understood why it existed. Their kit isn't outdated, Zal said slowly as if working through the logic as she spoke. It's deliberately simple because complex systems fail. And humans never forgot how to work with nothing. It's more than that, Vexith added, his mind racing through connections. Automated systems fail in predictable ways. They stop working and you're helpless. But simple tools, basic knowledge, those don't fail. A hand crank doesn't need a computer to operate. A paper manual doesn't need power to display information. Chemical reactions work the same way every time if you follow the formula. He thought about Walsh building an oxygen scrubber from scratch. The engineer hadn't needed a computer to tell him what to do. He had manuals, knowledge, and hands-on experience. When his complex systems failed, he fell back on fundamentals that had worked for his species for thousands of generations. Look at what we've been watching, Vexith continued, warming to his realization. When their water recycler broke, Walsh didn't wait for rescue or give up. He built a new one. When their oxygen scrubber failed, he built another. When Laura was injured, she treated herself. They don't view technology as something that saves them. They view it as a tool they use. And when that tool breaks, they make a new tool. Quillnex pulled up the current status of the Perseverance. Commander, look at this. They've actually improved some of their systems. Their water recycler is now more efficient than the original. Their power distribution is better balanced. Walsh has been making upgrades while keeping everything running. Because he's not just fixing problems, Zal said. He's engineering. With his hands and his brain and simple tools, he's improving a broken spacecraft. The crew watched the humans going about their routines. It was cycle 16, and they had 8 cycles remaining until rescue. The humans showed no signs of stress anymore. They had adapted completely to their situation. Peter's plants were growing well. The crew was healthy. Their systems were stable. I need to file a report, Vexith said. This changes our understanding of human capabilities. What will you tell the council? Quillnex asked. Vexith considered carefully. That we've been evaluating humans incorrectly. We saw their simple technology and assumed they were behind us in development. We were wrong. They're not behind. They're just approaching survival from a completely different philosophy. We trust our technology. They trust themselves. Will the council understand? Zal wondered. They will when I show them this footage, Vexith replied. 6 humans survived catastrophic failure for 16 cycles on equipment most species would consider useless. And they didn't just survive. They're thriving. That's not luck. That's not accident. That's the result of 200,000 years of evolution teaching them that survival depends on adaptability, knowledge, and determination. He looked at his crew, seeing his own species' limitations clearly for the first time. We need to learn from this. All of us do. The rescue ships arrived on cycle 23, exactly on schedule. Vexith watched as 3 vessels approached the Perseverance, their running lights bright against the darkness of space. The lead ship was commanded by Captain Threll, a member of the Vicarian species known for their efficiency and professionalism. This is Rescue Command to Kepler 7. Threll's voice came through clearly. The solar storms had finally passed. We have visual on the disabled vessel. Preparing to dock and evacuate survivors. Understood, Rescue Command, Vexith replied. The Perseverance has 6 crew members aboard. Be advised, they have been without main power for 23 cycles. There was a pause. 23 cycles? Commander, are you certain there are survivors? Very certain, Vexith said. You'll understand when you board. Vexith had arranged to accompany the rescue team. He needed to see this in person, to meet these remarkable humans face to face. Quilnex and Zal came with him, equally eager to witness the conclusion of what they had been watching for over 3 weeks. The rescue ship docked with the Perseverance smoothly. The airlock cycled open and the rescue team entered first, medical personnel ready with stretchers and emergency equipment. They were prepared for the worst, for humans barely clinging to life in a cold, dark, failing ship. What they found instead made them stop in confusion. The cargo bay was well lit, powered by the hand-crank generator that Nathan was currently operating. The temperature was cool but not dangerously cold. The air was fresh, processed by Walsh's improvised scrubber. And the 6 humans were not huddled together in desperation. They were working organized, calm. Captain Sophie Grant pushed off from where she had been reviewing a paper checklist and floated over to greet them. She was clean, her uniform neat, her expression professional and friendly. Welcome aboard the Perseverance, she said with a smile. You made good time. Captain Threll stared at her. His medical officer was scanning the humans with portable equipment, and his expression grew more confused by the second. Captain Grant, I don't understand, Threll said. You've been disabled for 23 cycles. Your main power is offline. Your life support systems failed. But my medical officer says you and your crew are in good health. Better than good health, actually. How is this possible? Sophie gestured around the cargo bay. We followed our emergency protocols. Used our training. Made do with what we had. Vexith entered the ship behind the rescue team, with Quilnex and Zal following. He looked around carefully, taking in details he had only seen through cameras before. Walsh's oxygen scrubber hummed quietly in the corner, a patchwork construction of parts that shouldn't work together but did. The water recycler showed green indicator lights, functioning perfectly despite being assembled from 3 different broken systems. Peter's small garden was thriving, tiny vegetables growing under makeshift lights. You've made improvements, Vexith said, speaking for the first time. Sophie turned to him, surprised. Commander Vexith from Kepler 7. We appreciated you monitoring us. It helped to know someone was watching. We did more than watch, Vexith admitted. We learned. May I look around? Of course, Sophie said. Vexith moved through the cargo bay with Quilnex and Zal. They examined Walsh's repairs up close. Every connection was solid, every joint sealed properly. The engineering was crude by galactic standards, but it was effective and reliable. Quilnex stopped at the emergency kit locker, which hung open on the wall. Most of the supplies had been used, but some remained. He picked up one of the paper manuals, flipping through pages of diagrams and instructions. Captain Grant, Quilnex said, turning to face her. I need to ask you something that has been bothering me since we first saw your emergency equipment. Is this some kind of joke? How is this kit enough? The other humans had gathered around now, curious about their visitors. Sophie looked at her crew, then back at Quilnex. She smiled, not mockingly but with genuine warmth. It's enough because it has to be enough, she said simply. You can't out-engineer Murphy's Law, but you can out-stubborn it. Murphy's Law? Zal asked. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, Walsh explained, floating over to join the conversation. It's an old human saying. You can build the most advanced, sophisticated system imaginable, but eventually something will break. Usually at the worst possible time. So we don't put all our trust in complex systems, Sophie continued. We carry simple tools that don't break easily. We train people to use those tools. We practice solving problems with limited resources. When everything fails, we fall back on knowledge and determination. Laura held up her arm, showing the scar from her self-inflicted stitches. I've practiced emergency medical procedures dozens of times in training. When I got injured, I knew exactly what to do. It hurt, but I knew I could do it. Same with the repairs, Walsh added. I've taken apart and rebuilt systems in every training simulation. I've practiced improvising with limited parts. This was just applying what I've learned over years of preparation. Captain Threll was still processing what he was seeing. But you were stranded for 23 cycles. The psychological stress alone should have broken you. Yet you're all calm, healthy, even in good spirits. Nathan laughed. It wasn't that bad, honestly. We had food, water, air, and each other. We kept busy. Told stories. Sang songs. Played cards. Humans have survived worse with less. Much worse, Peter agreed. My grandmother survived being stranded in a snowstorm for 8 days with nothing but the clothes she was wearing and a broken-down car. She walked out on her own 2 feet. This was easy compared to that. Vexith listened to them talk, hearing the confidence in their voices. These humans genuinely didn't understand what was remarkable about what they had done. To them, surviving with basic tools and knowledge was normal. Expected. Just part of being human. We need to bring your ship to the nearest station for proper repairs, Thrall said. We'll tow you there. Actually, Walsh said, if you can give me a replacement drive core, I can install it myself. Save you the towing fee. I've already cleared the mounting brackets and prepared the connections. Thrall looked at Vexith as if asking for confirmation that he was hearing this correctly. Vexith just nodded. You want to repair your own ship? Thrall asked. Sure, Walsh said casually. I've got the manuals right here. It's a straightforward swap. Give me 6 hours. The rescue team provided the replacement drive core. Walsh did indeed install it himself, with Claire and Nathan assisting. 6 hours and 20 minutes later, the Perseverance had main power restored. The human crew tested every system carefully, making sure everything functioned correctly. All systems green, Sophie reported. We're ready to navigate to the station under our own power. The rescue ships departed, still somewhat confused by what they had witnessed. Vexith remained behind for a few more minutes, saying goodbye to the human crew. Thank you for watching over us, Commander, Sophie said, shaking his hand in the human custom. Thank you for teaching us something important, Vexith replied. About survival. About preparation. About human capability. He returned to Kepler 7 and went directly to his office. He pulled up humanity's file in the Galactic database and stared at the classification for a long moment. It read status, friendly. Technology level, developing. Threat assessment, minimal. Notes, charmingly backwards but eager to learn. Vexith deleted the notes section and wrote new ones. Status, friendly. Technology level, adequate and intentionally simplified. Threat assessment, moderate to high. Notes, humanity's apparent technological simplicity is deliberate philosophy, not limitation. Species demonstrates exceptional survival capability, improvisation skills, and psychological resilience. 200,000 years of evolution in hostile environment has produced beings who excel in crisis situations. Standard emergency equipment is primitive by design but highly effective in practice. Recommend revision of human capability assessments across all categories. Classification change, dangerously competent. He filed the report and sent copies to the Galactic Council, the Transit Authority, and every rescue coordination center in his sector. Other species needed to understand what he had learned. Humans were not charmingly backwards. They were not primitive. They were survivors who had turned limitation into strength and necessity into art. They prepared for the worst and made it look easy. Vexith looked at his own species' emergency protocols and began writing recommendations for changes. The humans had taught him that the best survival tool wasn't the most advanced technology. It was knowledge, practice, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Out in space, the Perseverance continued its journey toward the station, its human crew already back to their normal routines, treating their 23-cycle survival ordeal as just another story to tell over dinner.